Hey everyone, my name is Matt. Welcome to my shop and welcome to episode 16 of my Ask Matt series where I answer topics suggested by you, the viewer. Now today's topic is probably my most highly suggested topic ever, and that is to do a video on card scrapers, what they are, how they work, and most importantly, how to sharpen them. Now card scrapers are going to come in a few different varieties. You have your standard rectangular ones and you have some profiled ones. Now first off, with the rectangular ones, you have different sizes, different dimensions all over, and of course different thicknesses. And the different thicknesses are going to really just dictate how much flex they have for when you use them. And of course, if you're doing some kind of profile work, you have different profile ones as well. I have these ones here which have different radiuses on them. So if you want to get into a radius concavity, you have those. Of course, if you're doing any kind of curved moldings or deep profile moldings, you have the gooseneck scraper. That's great on gooseneck moldings as well. This one here has a slight radius on both sides in case you want to get down into something that has a slight concavity. And this guy here has a radius on both sides, a convex and a concave side, so you can get into different things with that as well. So those are just the ones that come commercially available, and of course these are just pieces of spring steel. There's not much to them, and of course you can modify these to make any shape you want if you're trying to clean up any kind of profile you might have. So all you have to do with that is just take a file to these, shape them to what you need, and then you can use them as a custom scraper for whatever profile molding or whatever you're trying to clean up. Now most of the time in my shop I'm using these standard rectangular shaped scrapers to just clean up boards for finish prep or to remove some tear out. Now the really interesting thing about a card scraper is how it works. You might think, well, how does a little piece of steel like this with no bevel on it cut wood? And the secret to these things is a small burr that you put on the edge of the card scraper, and that's actually what does the cutting of the wood. And the benefit there is that burr doesn't really care about grain direction or any kind of crazy grain stuff that's going on. It'll give you a perfect tear-out-free cut every single time. So that's why this is great for cleaning up really hard to plane grain. So you might have some wood that you might send through the planer that's got a lot of tear out on it. A few passes with the card scraper and that tear will be gone and you can continue on your way. Now you can also do that with sandpaper, of course. This way is a little bit faster and it leaves a little bit better of a surface when you're done. So before I get into how I actually sharpen one of these things, it's important to note that if you ask 100 woodworkers how to sharpen one of these things, you'll get 50 of them telling you 50 different ways, and you'll probably get 50 of them telling you that they still don't know how to sharpen these things. It is a very elusive thing and it can be very frustrating, and I think that's why there's so many videos and information out there about sharpening one of these card scrapers. The important thing to remember is there are different ways to do it. They all kind of work the same way to get to the same point. It's finding the method that works for you and that you can reproduce and get the same results in your shop. I was very frustrated when I first started and I could not get this thing sharp no matter what videos I watched or what methods I tried until I kind of, developed my own way of doing it, and that's the way I'm going to show you today. Before I show you that, let's talk a little bit about exactly how the geometry works on these things as you're sharpening it, because I think that's really important to see. So let's take a look at the profile view of a card scraper to really understand the geometry of what's going on here as you're trying to sharpen one. So what you're looking at right now is just the scraper as it would be after the filing and polishing steps, which I'll show you in a little bit. The corners are nice and crisp, and there's no deviation here. You want some nice crisp corners, and if you're looking down at the top, you wouldn't see any kind of waviness or anything. This would be flat along the entire length going back to the other side of the scraper. Now the next step is going to be to deform the top to start turning the burr on the edge of the scraper. And I'm just going to draw this on one corner. When you're actually sharpening, you would do it on both sides so you have two edges to work with. But as you're coming on with this burnisher, you're basically doing that. You're pulling the material out and creating a little bit of a hook in that direction there. Now the next step is going to be to take this little bit of this hook here and turn it down so it actually creates a cutting hook. So what that would look like is if we just take this corner and we pull it down, you get something like that. So that is what we're trying to go for when we're creating the burr on the edge of the scraper. So I have two methods that I use to sharpen my card scrapers depending on what I'm trying to do with the wood I'm working on. And the first method I'm going to show you is my longer method. That's the way I'm going to do it if I am doing some finish prep on a board, and I'm not planning on doing any more surface prep to the board. This is going to be right before I put finish on, so I want a really, really nice, clean, fine burr on this card scraper. So the first thing I'm going to do is take the card scraper, put it in my vise, and then I use a file to smooth out the edge and remove any deviations in the piece of steel, making it nice and flat. And I like to do this freehand. You can also hold this up against a block of wood like this to keep it nice and square if you want, if you're more comfortable doing that. Different ways to do this, of course, however you want. I like freehand, so I'll just file that. I'm using my fingers as a guide to keep me kind of square here. Give that a few passes, and looking at the scraper, I don't see any humps or valleys anymore, so now I can move on to the next step. So next I'm going to start polishing the edge, and this is a 4,000 grit water stone, and the first thing I'm going to do is polish the faces of the card scraper. This will remove any existing burrs and start to clean up that corner to get that nice and crisp. And then next I'll polish the edge. And again, I'll do this freehand on the stone. And I just like to move it around just so I get some even wear on the stone. If you don't want to use the face of your stone, you can also use the edge of the stone if you don't want to wear if you're worried about wearing the top of the stone too much. Also, again, if you aren't comfortable doing a freehand, take a block of wood, use that as a guide, and then you can just use that like this. And since I have an 8,000 grit stone, I'm going to use that one as well. And then I'll finish off with the edges again, just to remove any burr that I might have put on by polishing the edge. There. And now I'm going to work on actually turning the hook or the burr on the card scraper. And to do that, I'm going to use this tool. This is a burnisher. And really all this is a round piece of steel that is harder than the card scraper. One thing I like to do is put a little bit of oil on the burnisher, just because metal on metal always seems to work better with oil. And then I'm going to start out by running the burnisher across the edge of the card scraper, keeping it as close to square as possible. And one thing, this is probably the biggest thing that made a difference for me when I was trying to figure out how to sharpen a card scraper, is I see a lot of people, when they sharpen theirs, they put a lot of downward pressure on at this stage. I don't. I just use the weight of my arms to apply the pressure. So it's really not much at all, and I'm only going to do a few light passes. So maybe 4 or 5 of them. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. That's it. Now that's going to create the mushroom effect, and now to actually turn the hook over, all I'll do is just tip the burnisher a little bit and do passes on each side to create a hook on both sides of the card scraper. Now I should be able to feel it. It's there, and that's a really, really fine burr. Wipe off the oil here, and let's go test it out. All right, let's see how I did. Not bad. Nice wispy shavings, and that's what you're looking for. Let's see if I got the other side. Nice. You know, sometimes I still don't get it every single time, but it always feels good when you get it sharp on both sides. First try. So what I really like about this really fine burr is it lasts a lot longer than a really rough, heavy burr. It also, since we did a lot more polishing on here, the edge is nice and smooth, so that burr is really consistent along its entire length. So as you're scraping, this is a finished, ready surface. There's no track marks in it, and it's just ready to go. Now, again, I said if I wanted to do something a little faster, I do have a faster method for doing this, but it's not going to produce as fine of a finish on the wood. But let me show you that. Okay, so my faster method is going to be pretty much exactly the same thing, except we're going to skip the stones and use just the file. So same thing as before, I'm going to put the card scraper into the vise and file the edge. Just like that. Now you could technically use this scraper like this. The file does leave a burr on the edge, but I find that burr is really weak and tends to fall off really quickly, so we'll be right back to this step again. So the next thing I'll do is just run the scraper on the file to remove that burr. I can feel it, it's totally gone. And now I can go to the burnisher. Same thing as before, keeping it nice and square for the first passes, and then tilting it in either direction to actually establish the hook. There we go. That does work. It does leave a fuzzier surface though. But again, this is really great if you're trying to just clean something up and you're going to hit this with some sandpaper again, or whatever your finishing process is. You're just trying to clean it up before that. So maybe just save you a little bit of time when you're sanding. So these tools are incredibly easy to use, as you've already seen me do. There are two methods for using these things. You can either push a scraper through, or you can pull it back towards you. I personally have never been able to get it to work in the pull direction. That's just me. I know people do it and they do just fine. But for me, I like to push it. As I'm pushing, I do flex the scraper with my thumbs just to give it a little more of like a snowplow effect. And I also do skew it a little bit to make the cutting a little bit better or a little bit easier. Now, one thing with using one of these things is you're creating a lot of friction when you're doing this. And this piece of steel is going to heat up really quickly and it's probably going to burn your thumbs. So a really easy solution to that is to take a refrigerator magnet, stick that on the back there, and use that as a little bit of a pad between your thumbs and the scraper itself, and that gives you a little bit more of a buffer. There's a little more material there to absorb the heat and keep your thumbs off the hot steel. And in case you're wondering how a dull scraper performs in comparison to a sharp scraper, a dull scraper will only produce dust, whereas a sharp scraper will actually produce shavings. So what if you went through the entire process and you go to use your card scraper and it still isn't cutting? Well, here's an idea of something that could be happening. So this is the way that the card scraper should be oriented, or my terrible drawing of it. What could be happening is you've actually turned this hook so far over that there's no way for it to actually grab the wood and initiate a cut. I know it's sort of a bad drawing, but the idea here is that you've turned this hook so far in on itself that there's no way for it to actually engage. And when you go to actually run your scraper over the wood, this part right here is what's actually contacting the wood, not the hook, and you're not going to get any cuts. Now that could be because of too much downward pressure as using the burnisher, or by rolling that burnisher too far over on an angle as you're creating the hook on the second pass of the burnisher. You're really just rolling that hook too far inward to the body, and it's never going to cut. So I hope you enjoyed taking a look at this extremely handy tool with me, and I hope you can see that there really is no substitute when you're working with highly figured woods or highly crotched woods like this walnut crotch here. And don't forget though, if you don't get it the first time, don't get frustrated. Try a different method, try something a little different, maybe just try again. It does take a little bit of practice, and just get out there and try it and see if you can get these things sharp. And when you do, when you nail that technique, you're going to have the biggest grin on your face. At least I know I did. So let me know if you have any questions about anything I talked about today. And as always, thank you for watching. And until next time, happy woodworking.